Right now, a woman gets ready to open her business. A farmer checks on his livestock. A baker takes out her first batch. In every part of the world, each day starts anew with their mission of bringing satisfaction and happiness through food. Each bread kneaded with love. Each meal handled with care. This noble undertaking is our passion, to provide the best of ingredients and the best of breeds. By being your partner, we have the opportunity to feed the world. We are one food group. The food subsidiary of one of the top conglomerates in the Philippines, Aboitiz Equity Ventures, with over 100 years of advancing business and communities. We occupy a niche in its core businesses by being its integrated food and agribusiness company. Guided by our principles of guidance, consistency, and results, we are dedicated to partnering with our stakeholders to grow and scale their businesses. Above and beyond our quality products, we provide solutions and build partnerships for growth. As one of the industry leaders, we are relentless in our pursuit of excellence by acquiring capacities and capabilities to further expand our footprint across the Asia Pacific. Today, Pilmico and Gold Coin have a strong multinational presence. We have multiple research and production facilities all over the Asia Pacific. We take pride in continuously cultivating an agile and multicultural workforce that is driven by our values of integrity, teamwork, innovation, and responsibility. With these combined strengths, we are equipped to take a leadership position in innovating the food value chain. After a day of labor, everyone deserves a bountiful harvest that will bring happiness in every gathering, in every order, and in every plate we come home to. Right now, a woman gets ready to open her business. A farmer checks on his livestock. A baker takes out her first batch. In every part of the world, each day starts anew with their mission of bringing satisfaction and happiness through food. Each bread kneaded with love. Each meal handled with care. This noble undertaking is our passion, to provide the best of ingredients and the best of breeds. By being your partner, we have the opportunity to feed the world. We are one food group. The food subsidiary of one of the top conglomerates in the Philippines, Aboitiz Equity Ventures. With over 100 years of advancing business and communities, we occupy a niche in its core businesses by being its integrated food and agri-business company. Guided by our principles of guidance, consistency, and results, we are dedicated to partnering with our stakeholders to grow and scale their businesses. Above and beyond our quality products, we provide solutions and build partnerships for growth. As one of the industry leaders, we are relentless in our pursuit of excellence by acquiring capacities and capabilities to further expand our footprint across the Asia Pacific. Today, Pilmico and Gold Coin have a strong multinational presence. We have multiple research and production facilities all over the Asia Pacific. We take pride in continuously cultivating an agile and multicultural workforce that is driven by our values of integrity, teamwork, innovation, and responsibility. With these combined strengths, we are equipped to take a leadership position in innovating the food value chain. After a day of labor, everyone deserves a bountiful harvest that will bring happiness in every gathering, in every order, and in every plate we come home to. Right now, a woman gets ready to open her business. A farmer checks on his livestock. A baker takes out her first batch. In every part of the world, each day starts anew with their mission of bringing satisfaction and happiness through food. Each bread kneaded with love. Each meal handled with care. This noble undertaking is our passion, to provide the best of ingredients and the best of breeds. By being your partner, we have the opportunity to feed the world. We are one food group. the food subsidiary of one of the top conglomerates in the Philippines, Aboitiz Equity Ventures. With over 100 years of advancing business and communities, we occupy a niche in its core businesses by being its integrated food and agribusiness company. Guided by our principles of guidance, consistency, and results, we are dedicated to partnering with our stakeholders to grow and scale their businesses. Above and beyond our quality products, we provide solutions and build partnerships for growth. As one of the industry leaders, we are relentless in our pursuit of excellence by acquiring capacities and capabilities to further expand our footprint across the Asia Pacific. Today, Pilmico and Gold Coin have a strong multinational presence. We have multiple research and production facilities all over the Asia Pacific. We take pride in continuously cultivating an agile and multicultural workforce that is driven by our values of integrity, teamwork, innovation, and responsibility. With these combined strengths, we are equipped to take a leadership position in innovating the food value chain. After a day of labor, everyone deserves a bountiful harvest that will bring happiness in every gathering, in every order, and in every plate we come home to.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this exclusive Agriconnect series. We are thrilled to have participants from China, the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia in this informative session about swine productivity, where we'll explore the crucial topics shaping the future of our food systems. By the way, I am your host, Shadid Sidri, and I will be with you all throughout this enlightening series of Agriconnect. As we all know, the global demand for food is rising at an unprecedented rate. Ensuring food security has never been more critical. We face numerous challenges and opportunities, especially in safeguarding our livestock, which play a vital role in our food supply chain. So, what should be our next step as swine producers to address this important task? But before we proceed to the insightful discussion and meet our distinguished swine experts, we want to give you a preview of what to expect in this series of informative episodes. Please watch this.
Food sustains life. And as innovators in the food and agriculture industry, our role transcends mere planting, harvesting, and farming. It's about nourishing generations and securing sustenance for all. Today, we confront various challenges impacting farm productivity. As global food demand rises, we struggle to match production, hindered by livestock productivity issues. Our solution? Utopia. Maximizing farm efficiency. Produce more with less effort. Let us drive significant change through integration and collaboration. Connect with industry experts, innovators, and more. Innovation fuels the agriculture and livestock industry. Let's come together under one banner at Agriconnect, strengthening the community and reaching your peak performance through livestock expertise. Let us shape a brighter, more resilient future for the agriculture and livestock industry.
Utopia is our solution where we maximize farm efficiency by producing more with less effort. Here at Agriconnect, we aim to drive significant change through integration and collaboration. Tonight, we will begin connecting with industry experts, innovators, and others. But first things first, this webinar is an exclusive event and may include confidential and proprietary information belonging to Aboitiz, Pelmico, Gold Coin, and the respective industry experts. This information is intended solely for the use of webinar participants and is not to be disclosed or shared with any third parties. Please refrain from disclosing, disseminating, or otherwise making available any confidential information to individuals outside of the seminar. Thank you for your understanding. Report any safety concerns or incidents to the event organizers through the provided feedback channels and follow local health guidelines, especially for in-person components of the event. Familiarize yourself with the nearest fire exit Inform organizers of any accessibility needs in advance, and follow staff instructions regarding crowd movement while avoiding overcrowded areas. Stay hydrated, take breaks to prevent fatigue, and ensure fire exits and firefighting equipment remain unobstructed. So now, let us begin with the Agriconnect series. We also encourage everyone to turn on your cameras and keep your microphones muted at all times. As a reminder to all our guests, there will be a quick pause after each slide is shown to give time for our translators to complete their translations. We are broadcasting to 5 countries: the Philippines, China, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Thank you for your understanding. Our first episode is dedicated to one of the livestock industry's most significant segments, swine. We will discuss factors influencing sow productivity and piglet nutrition to increase your farm performance and productivity. And for this, we are thrilled to have with us distinguished subject matter experts from the Netherlands who will share their invaluable insights and experiences. Their knowledge will help us understand how we can enhance our practices and ensure a secure and sustainable future for swine farming. Our first subject matter expert is a graduate of Wageningen University, where she studied animal science. She gained practical experience at a training center specializing in swine and poultry husbandry. With over 10 years in the R&D team at SFR, her research focuses on sow studies, particularly in improving piglet vitality and extending sow longevity. Today, she will be presenting on the effect of nutrition on the development and productivity of the rearing gilt. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Dr. Sandra Bentham de Grave.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invite and the good introduction. Indeed, I'm Sandra Bentham de Grave from SFR, as we call it. And as was just mentioned, we will start with the effect of nutrition and development on the productivity of rearing gilts, because of course this is where the vitality of newborn piglets starts, and also the longevity of the sows. So with a good rearing gilt, you will have not necessarily a good production, but at least you have a good start on a good production of the sows. So first of all, I want to pinpoint or actually explain where the biggest problem is that when we talk about gilts, of course, when we talk about sows, actually, we want them to stay as long in production as possible. But as we see in practice, quite a bit of the gilts or sows are already culled at a very young age, as we can see in the graph here, which was a study that was done a couple of years ago, where we see that the majority of the sows was culled already in the first parity, or even when they were just a gilt. And usually we use the rule of thumb that a sow becomes profitable after the second or the third litter. So with culling on a very young age, they only cost money, they don't make any money. And actually the maximum production of the milk, and therefore also litter growth, is from the fourth litter onwards. So to increase productivity of the sow, to increase the longevity of the sow, we have to reduce the culling before the third parity. And so that is why we have to focus on the rearing of the gilts. And there's many factors that affect the performance and the longevity. For example, the weight of the gilt at birth, her colostrum intake, so when she is still young, but also weaning weight and age, boar exposure to show oestrus, but also, and that is what we will focus on a bit more, is the feeding strategies during rearing, and how we can adapt the nutrition of the gilts to make sure that we don't have to cull them on the first cycle or even before. So first I want to pinpoint is that the birth of the gilt that we are selecting is very important, and also the weaning weight and the weaning age. And we can see in the first graph is where they made groups of gilts with different birth weights, below 1 kilo, between 1 and 1.5, and above 1.5 kilo. And you see that the gilts that had a birth weight above 1.5 kilos, they stayed much longer in the farm, in production, than the triangles that we can see that dropped quite immediately in after the first farrowing. So they are the lighter gilts, and you see that the remaining percentage in production drops quite quickly after first farrowing. And on the second slide, second picture, we see that as well. But then for basically weaning weight, what they did there in this study is that they split the litters. For one group of the sows, only 6 piglets were present in the litter, so she had to suckle only 6 piglets, and the other sows would get more than 12 piglets. So there's a lot more competition, and you can imagine that the weaning weight is slightly lower for those piglets. And also there you see that with the squares, that are the ones that had a heavier birth weaning weight, they remained in production much longer than the ones that with a lighter weaning weight. And then if we move to the bottom of the slide, that is a picture on the weaning age, where it actually shows that with an increase of weaning age of those gilts, so when they were still young, they will stay longer in production. So that is what we can see there, that percentage. They will stay longer in production. And even when there's an increase of 3 days, this would in the end result in 0.5 piglets per sow per year more. So weaning at a later age, because they are a little bit heavier, because they are a little bit better developed, will benefit the performance of the sow. So if we then focus on the period after the rearing phase, and of course we are working to the point of insemination, there is some variables that we take into account for the right insemination moment. And the first one is the number of oestruses that a sow had, and we can see that in the top right of the sheet, where it basically shows that inseminating from the second cycle, so not on the first one, but on the second cycle of the gilt, will improve your reproductive performance by increasing ovulation rate and therefore number of piglets born alive, but also increasing the farrowing rate, so the farrowing percentage from first insemination. So basically it shows do not inseminate on the first cycle, but inseminate only on the second cycle. It is no point of waiting any longer, but the second cycle is good enough. And at the bottom of the sheet, we can see the effect of weight at insemination, or as it says here, weight entering the breeding units, and the effect on litter size. We can see there very clearly that with an increase in the breeding weight, we have an increase in litter size as well. But take into account that at least for our standards, this weight range is pretty below what we are inseminating in. We are in the Netherlands, we are, let's say nowadays around 160, 170 kilos. So we're a bit on the right side of that graph, but still it shows an increase in insemination weight will result in an increase in litter size. In the first cycle, that is. And on the right bottom, we have the effect of the back fat thickness. And that is also what we know really well. When a sow has more back fat already at first breeding, this will positively affect the litter size at the litter production, the number of piglets produced in a lifetime for the sow, because she can remain in the herd longer than when she has no body reserves. Here we have some targets at insemination. Of course, every breeding company has its own specific targets because every type of sow is slightly different. So at the top we have the targets from TN70 sows. The second one is the den breds, and you see that there's slight differences, but not too much. But as I said, they are all specific for that genetics. And at the bottom, we have an SFR data analysis, which is done with TN70 sows, because that is what we have on our farm. And basically, it is summarized, but we can also see it in the tables. That when we increase the weight at service, especially the first cycle, there's a slight increase in number of total borns, but it does not really remain up to the third cycle. But they're especially above 150 kilos, there's a slightly better performance than below 150 kilos. And we see the same thing with the back fats, that we have a lower production when the back fat at surface is slightly lower. But what is more interesting actually is not necessarily the big difference in performance, but it is the effect on culling percentage. So the amount of sows that had to be excluded from the herd, and you see that is much higher when the insemination weight is above 160 going to 170 kilos. And for back fat, it is actually the other way around. If we do not have enough back fat, the sows are culled sooner than when they have a good back fat reserve. So this was just to show you how important the weight is, and especially the back fat is. And in the past, it was talked a lot about reaching this insemination weight, and it was hard to reach that specific weight. But that is not the issue with the modern sows anymore, because the growth potential that the gilts have is much higher than the recommendations. And this is from a study that we recently did at SFR, where we fed the gilts ad libitum to secure uniformity within the gilts, because of course that is also quite important. But this resulted in a very, very high feed intake. And you can see that very high feed intake resulted in a really high growth. And I split the sows, the gilts in that study, I split in 3 groups. And you can see already that the low growth group was already on average higher than the SFR analysis. So the 668 grams per day is higher than the 640 and is, well, in the range of Topics Northwind, which says it needs to be above 650. But as you have seen before, when it is too high, it can also have a negative effect. But yeah, basically the heaviest gilt was about 225 kilos at insemination. So this is in a completely different range than the recommendations are. So this is just to show you that if you just feed the gilts a normal gilt diet, they can eat so much that they grow really, really fast. And that we actually should restrict them because it can have a negative effect. And that negative effect is actually a negative effect on leg problems, or an effect on an increase in leg problems, and therefore a higher culling rate. And quite a bit of research has been done on this, looking at the growth rates up to insemination and the percentage of leg problems, as we can see in the blue bars. For example, those gilts were fed semi-ad libitum on a feeding scheme, or 75% on a feeding scheme, resulting in a relatively high growth to a relatively low growth. And you see this lower growth resulted in this case, only 20% leg problems, though the high growth above 700 grams per day resulted in about 50% of the gilts showing leg problems. So this is very clearly that growth rate affects the prevalence of leg problems. And in a lot of cases for gilts, this is osteochondrosis. And osteochondrosis is basically damaged cartilage, also due to rapid growth. And that is also what a Dutch study focused on in Wageningen quite a bit a few years ago. And that is what we see on the bottom left, where the higher growth rates resulted in a severe osteochondrosis, which can actually result in lameness, and therefore additional leg problems, and therefore higher culling rates. Oh, sorry. So what should we do? We should try to slow down the growth, but it needs to be constant. So it should not be a start-stop growth, because that negatively affects the cartilage as well. But with controlling the growth, we actually need to feed them a rearing gilt diet, because the requirements for rearing gilts are very different than, for example, growing finishing pigs or gestating sows. And that is what we can see in this picture, where we have the rearing gilts, the requirements of rearing gilts. And this is an example from Topping's recommendations, where we see the rearing gilts on the left and the growing finishing pigs, and then the female growing finishing pigs in the three columns next to it. And you can see very clearly that there is a very big difference in the amount of calcium that a rearing gilt needs compared to a growing finishing pig. And of course, this makes sense, because she has to develop bones that have to last so much longer than for a growing finishing pig. And in this case, there are not too many differences with the lysine, but it also really depends, lysine and the energy, but it also really depends on the feed levels, of course, that you give the gilts. And like I showed you before, if you just let a rearing gilt eat what she wants, she can eat up to, well, in our study at the end of gestation, they were eating about 3.5 kilos up to, at the end of the rearing phase, 3.5 up to 4 kilos a day. So you can imagine, with high feed levels or feed intakes like that, that the lysine consumption is really, really high, and therefore also a growth rate can be really high. But it is not only the calcium and the phosphorus requirements that are different. It is also vitamin levels that are or vitamin requirements that are different for rearing gilts than for growing finishing pigs. Because of course, those additional vitamins, they can support the development of the reproductive system. Basically same as for humans as well, with folic acid and fat-soluble vitamins. And that is also where it is very different from a gas station diet, which is sometimes also fed to rearing gilts. But a gas station diet is also very different and much lower in lysine, as you can see here. So what you can do to reduce or limit or control the growth is basically, if you have very high feed levels or feed intake, as we have seen here, and you have no good way on restricting the sow or the gilt in their feed intake, is of course reducing the SID lysine to energy ratios in the diet. So you get a more diluted diet, so they can eat more, and the daily lysine intake will be reduced slightly because of that. And that is also what we can see here when we compare the low, medium, and high SID lysine to energy levels in this study. And with a slight reduction in the growth rates, we could indeed control the insemination rates. Well, like I said, there has been a lot of studies on osteochondrosis, so the actual leg problems in gilts, and it has shown that not a lot of nutritional interventions had reducing effect on the prevalence of osteochondrosis. There was one study done with vitamin D, so increasing the 25-hydroxy component in the blood of the sow, and where it showed that when this was included in the diet, the study was done in growing finishing pigs though, but for gilts it works the same. And there, with the inclusion of 25-hydroxy D3 in the diet, they were able to reduce the incidence of osteochondrosis, and that is what we also see here in this graph, where with increasing levels there was a reduction in the prevalence of osteochondrosis. And so if we then just focus on the last bit of the rearing phase, so we have controlled the growth of the gilt, so we've been doing that really well. Then the last phase before the actual insemination, we should focus on flushing the gilts. And this is basically the same as for multiparasous between weaning and insemination, is basically to increase the amount of energy. And then it is not any type of energy, no, it is the glucogenic energy, so from sugars. And that is to stimulate the reproductive hormones and also to stimulate the ovary activity. And of course, with the two of them, we have an increased number of ovulated follicles and also an increase in the release of progesterone. So this has a positive effect on the embryonic survival, but also in just maintaining the pregnancy for the sow in total. And that is what we see here in the graph, especially on the left. They started here 14 days prior to insemination by, in this case, just increasing the feed level from 2.5 to 3.5, and therefore, of course, increasing especially the intake of starch in this case, because that is glucogenic energy. And you see with no flushing compared to flushing, basically all the parameters that were measured, they were increased. And if we look on the right side of the screen, that is a study that they also did with different levels of, also different feed intake levels. And what they saw there is that the back fat of the gilts also has an interferes basically with the effect of flushing, and that makes sense because they saw that a higher feed level previous to ovulation was especially beneficial in lower back fat gilts. So that makes sense. If they have less body reserves, they need a little bit of an extra boost to stimulate this ovulation. And this is where we see indeed, I will not go too much in detail, but where it shows that actually it is the glucogenic energy as an energy source that is needed for flushing, and not so much the fat energy. And you see that here it has the glucogenic energy, so coming from starch, has a positive effect on follicle size and on ovulation rate. And this can easily be done to extra increase the glucogenic energy by just putting sugar on top just before 14 days to 2 weeks before plant insemination. And this can also be used in multiparous sows, of course, between weaning and insemination. And then we get to the last bit of this presentation, just to make it a little bit more applicable for your situation as well. We still have a lot of rain here, so not too much heat stress, but of course in Southeast Asia, complete Asia, heat stress is much more problem. And basically, heat stress has a negative effect on the follicle size, as we can see here, and also on the serum progesterone levels, affecting the amount of repeat breeders. So by reducing heat stress, we can also improve the performance of the gilts/sows as well. And then the last one, of course, due to an increase in temperature, there's also a higher risk of mycotoxins. And mycotoxins, are, of course, always can be an issue, but specifically, DON can induce toxic effects on the ovaries, negatively affecting the follicle development. And of course, Sierra Leone, we also know that this has a negative effect on estrogen receptors, and therefore also interferes with the whole reproductive system. So normally we should avoid mycotoxins, of course, but especially when we talk about gilts and development of their reproductive system, the presence of mycotoxins really impairs follicle development and therefore also performance of the sow/gilt. So in conclusion, Yeah, we have to control the growth rate of the gilts. It should be somewhere between 600 and 700 grams a day from birth to insemination. And most important, that we have to make this a gradual or constant growth and not a start-stop. If we go higher than this 700, 750 grams a day, there's an increase, and there can be an increase in leg problems. And if you have already leg problems with these growth rates, you might need to slow them down a bit more. And in that case, it's also even more important to feed the gilts a specific rearing diet with the focus on calcium and phosphorus and additional vitamins. And as we've seen in the last sheets, it is very important for a gilt and their reproductive performance to limit heat stress and reduce the mycotoxin risk. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Sandra. Now, our floor is open for your questions. All right, once again, thank you very much, Dr. Sandra.
No worries. Thank you.
Now our floor is open for your questions. So if you have any questions about the presentation or the study, you can send your questions through the chat box. Now, may I request our moderator, Mr. Glenn Banogon, to join us here for the Q&A segment.
Thank you, Shad. Good morning, Dr. Sandra. So, team, please chat your questions in the chat box. So, keep that questions coming even after the presentation. So, if we don't have time, we will ask also our experts to answer those questions. Okay. So, for our first question, Dr. Chandra, what is the best reason or explanation for feeding replacement gilts with rearing diets instead of growing finishing diets?
Yeah, because as we have seen in that slide that I showed you, if we compare rearing gilt diets or recommendations with grow finishing diets, there's a lack of, especially of calcium in there. But on top of that calcium, there's also a lack on the vitamin levels, like as you showed you, the folic acids or the fat-soluble vitamins that a gilt really needs to develop her reproductive system so she can give us the performance that we want from her.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Dr. Chandra. There's another question coming up. So you mentioned that an increase of 3 days in terms of weaning age, so I assume that is going to 28 days, results in an additional 0.5 piglet per sow per year. Could you explain further, or what is the physiological explanation for that?
Yeah, of course, that really has to do with an increase in weaning age. There's also, of course, an increase in the body weight of the piglet, and also the development of the complete piglet, but also of the intestine, of course. And then with weaning slightly later, this will positively affect the transition through weaning. So the post-weaning dip will probably be less, and since that will be less, they can continue this development a bit better. So it is basically the same reason also as for normal piglets going to be growing finishing pigs, if you can reduce this post-weaning problems like the diarrhea, etc., this will benefit them later in life, and it will especially benefit the gilts, of course, because they have to be on the farm as long as possible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we're flying to China. Question from China. At what time and at what weight is the first selection of gilts started?
Well, the first selection of gilts should already be done at birth, really, because you don't want piglets below 1 kilo, as I've showed you in the graph as well. You don't want piglets below 1 kilo to be your rearing gilts and eventually your sow population, because we have seen in those studies, they show that really when you wean them very low, or when they are weaned born below 1 kilo, the quality of the piglets is just not as good as we want them to be. So that is where it starts. And then, of course, with lighter piglets, the whole colostrum intake after is also very important. So there's a lot of different moments where you should, look at very critical at your replacement herd.
Oh, yeah, thanks. From China, we go back to Philippines. How can we increase average birth weight and uniformity of piglets of second parity sows? Because probably on your slide, there's some reduction on the second parity, but I think this is a common problem in second parity. There's a reduction in weights and also the uniformity of piglets.
Yeah, so I think this is more like going to the sow parts. I think Jan will also discuss a little bit on that, maybe not necessarily on this question, but he will pinpoint out some important things there. So maybe we can park this question for Jan's sow part.
Yeah, can. I think this is the last question for Dr. Sandra. What is the ideal herd replacement rate for sows?
This, of course, really depends on a lot of different factors, because a lot of it is also management, of course. But in the Netherlands and most part of Europe, we're mainly focused between, let's say around 45%, because that way you have quite, your longevity of your sows is quite good. Of course, there's still a bit of culling done at a younger age, but your oldest sows will easily reach parity 8, maybe parity 9, and even above. So I would say, like, on average it should be somewhere between 45%, 45%. But it really depends also on the productivity of your of the herd, of the sows, piglet prices, feed prices, a lot of different things.
Correct. Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Sandra, for your insights on sows.
Yeah, no worries.
And lovely flowers behind in Netherlands. Tulips.
Yeah, very Dutch.
So
very Dutch.
hope you can visit us someday. Someday soon.
And
Thank you.
And bring some flowers.
And bring some flowers. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Sandra.
No worries.
Dr. Sandra. So, we hope you learned a lot in that presentation, a lot to take away, particularly in the nutrition of gilts, the selection of gilts, and the many different factors that go into choosing when to breed and which gilts to breed. So now, let us move forward to our next subject matter expert. Just like Dr. Sandra, he is a product of Wageningen University, where he studied animal nutrition and physiology. He worked as a pig feed nutritionist at a leading feed mill in the Netherlands and spent 10 years as a researcher on pig nutrition at SFR. His work focused on feed evaluation and the introduction of energy evaluation systems of sows. Over the last 15 years, he gained international experience as an innovation manager and pig feed nutritionist at 4Farmers and Nutrico. He returned to SFR in September of 2023 as a senior consultant and product manager for swine. Today, he will discuss his presentation, developments in the nutrition around farrowing, and milk production of the lactating sow with us. Let us welcome Mr. Jan Flederus.
Thank you very much for the beautiful introduction, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Jan Flederus, and I will explain about nutrition around farrowing and especially how to stimulate milk production in the lactating sow. In this presentation, I will explain the developments in sow productivity, and that is affecting the requirements of the sow. I will explain how to feed the sow for a good farrowing process, since a good farrowing process is essential to have vital piglets, and vital piglets will stimulate the sow to produce milk. So can you stimulate milk production by nutrition? Answer yes, but we need vital piglets to stimulate the sow to produce milk. So first I will explain the developments in sow production level. What you see in this slide is an increase in the number of piglets born alive in 2019, 2021 and 2023. So these are average results in the Netherlands. So at this moment we have an average of 15.4 piglets born alive per liter, and that results in 31.1 piglets weaned per sow per year. This increase in productivity per sow is illustrated in this figure starting in 2001, and you can see an increase per year of plus 0.4 weaned piglets per sow per year. And also in the last couple of years, still there is the progress and there is the increased number of weaned piglets per sow per year. So we expect more piglets weaned per sow per year in the next years. The question is, what is the effect on birth weight of the piglets? In this figure, you see that with an increased litter size, there is a reduction in birth weight of the piglets, the average birth weight. And you can also see that multipara sows have on average a higher birth weight compared to primipara sows. And that is a relevant difference. For us as feed industry, it is important to have a good understanding of the developments in animal production and also the capacity of the sows to produce a lot of piglets and to translate those developments into diet composition and feeding schedules. So we need a good understanding of the nutrient requirements of the sow. Not only the amount of piglets has been increased, but also the body composition and the body weight of the sow has been developed in the last 20 years. So the question is how to feed the sow for a good farrowing process and vital piglets. So once more, if we have vital piglets, they will stimulate the sow to produce milk. In this next couple of slides, we will discuss energy availability. We will discuss how we can reduce severe obstipation around farrowing, and we will discuss how to activate calcium metabolism, and calcium is needed for the farrowing process and for milk production. This figure shows the effect of energy intake on the duration of the farrowing process. And what you see in the dark blue column, a longer farrowing process with a normal energy consumption. And in the light blue column, you see a fast farrowing process with a higher energy consumption. So energy consumption of the sow does have an effect on the speed of the farrowing process. That is also given here in this slide, where you see an increase in energy intake. Late gestation has a positive effect on birth weight, both for sows and also for gilts. So an important question is also how to feed the sow at the day of farrowing. We realize that in some farms, sows are not giving any feed at the day of farrowing, but we strongly promote to have feed intake also at the day of farrowing and to have a short interval between the last meal and the onset of farrowing. What you see in these figures, if the interval between last feed intake and onset of farrowing is more than 6 hours, then you need more assistance at farrowing, and there is also a higher amount of stillborn piglets. So the farrowing process takes more time and there are less piglets born alive. A practical application of energy availability is to increase the numbers of meal per day, to apply a feeding schedule that will be shown on the next slide, and also to adjust the diet composition. We recommend a gestation feed for the gestation period. And then at day 108, when the animals are moved into the farrowing rooms, to change from a gestation feed to a lactation feed, or better, a transition feed. And then after day 6, post-farrowing, to continue with a lactation feed. In this slide, you see an example and our recommendations for feeding schedule. And if you look to the time between day 108, so when the sows are moved from the gestation room into the farrowing rooms, so then to keep a feeding level of about 3.2 kilos for a multi-pair sow, and then to reduce it up till about 2.5 kilos per day, also at the expected day of farrowing. And after farrowing, to have a slowly and steady increase of feed intake up till the maximum feed intake is realized. And important is to give feed to the sow at the day of farrowing, to have a short interval between last meal and the farrowing process. And the reason is that the farrowing process is very energy consuming, so the sows need energy for a good and a fast farrowing process. And with nutrition, that is explained here. If you can click once more. Yep. So we recommend a transition feed between the moment when the sow is moved from the gestation room to the farrowing rooms, and then to have a transition feed around farrowing up till about 4 days post farrowing, and then to make a change to a lactating sow diet. And with the transition feed, you can really focus on energy to facilitate the farrowing process. You can also have a diet adjustment to speed up the calcium metabolism and the milk production, and to support sow health. In the lactating diet, you can have a more concentrated diet, also with a higher amino acid level, to focus completely on milk production and to reduce body weight loss for good reproduction for the next cycles of that sow. We know that if you have constipation, that it is negative for the farrowing process and negative for the amount of live-born piglets. So we need to avoid severe constipation around farrowing. Constipation around farrowing is a natural process and is also a result of a low feed intake. And it is also a consequence of a change in fiber level and fiber composition. And there is an increased water resorption from the body to produce colostrum and to produce milk. But be aware that a low feed intake, it is increasing the risk for obstipation, and obstipation is negative for the birth process. If you have constipation, the sow has discomfort and pain, but also the microbes in the intestinal tract, they can produce more endotoxins, and the endotoxins will reduce the milk production. So the endotoxins will affect the hormonal system, and that will reduce the milk production. We can reduce the risk for obstipation via dietary fiber. So normally we have a higher content of dietary fiber in the diets for gestating sow, but we also need to have a medium level of dietary fiber in the diets for lactating sows. Also the type of fiber is relevant, and we recommend to have a high content of fermentable fiber in the diets for gestating sows and lactating sows to prevent severe obstipation. The last part of the explanation of feed related to the farrowing process is all to do with calcium and how to activate calcium metabolism, since calcium is needed for milk production and for the farrowing process. Important is the moment of diet change from gestation to lactation feed and the calcium content in the diets and the form of calcium. And we can adjust the electrolyte balance in the feed to activate the calcium metabolism. The electrolyte balance can be used as a nutrient in diet formulation to stimulate the calcium metabolism. And important once more, calcium is necessary for the farrowing process and for the milk production. The calcium absorption, it's demand regulated via hormones. Also important is to realize that the feed intake is low, and with a low feed intake, there is insufficient calcium consumed. So calcium metabolism needs to be activated so that calcium and phosphor can be made available from the bones and facilitate the farrowing process and milk production. That metabolism is stimulated by an adjustment of the electrolyte balance via diet formulation. In this table illustrates the effect of a normal calcium content and a low calcium content in gestation feed. And what we see is that we can make sows lazy if they are fed with a high calcium content the entire gestation. So feeding a higher gestation level in the feed is making the sow lazy and results in a longer duration of the farrowing process. So practical implications, we can improve the farrowing process by energy, interval, last feed intake and the onset of farrowing. And we can also improve the milk production by vitality of the piglets. We should not have a high calcium content in diets for gestating sows, since then we create lazy animals with a lazy calcium metabolism. We can stimulate the calcium metabolism and make the calcium available from the bones for farrowing process and milk production when we decrease the electrolyte balance 5 to 7 days before farrowing compared to the gestation diet. And one way to do that is also by addition of sodium bicarbonate in the diet of gestation sows and replace it for normal salt in the lactating feed. So the question is, can you stimulate milk production by nutrition? Answer is yes, via vitality of the piglets. Nutrition to stimulate milk production. Is it a question of push or pull? So push via the sow's milk, and if you have a big udder under the sow, does it guarantee a lot of milk? No, we say, okay, we need vital piglets to stimulate the sow to produce milk. For that, we need good drinking water, good quality and availability of drinking water. For feeding schedule of sows, avoid overeating and avoid feed refusals. And you can increase the number of meals per day to have a better nutrient consumption. And the diet composition of gestating sows is not the same as lactating sows. And by feeding a transition diet in the week before up till the week post farrowing, you can really focus on the requirement of the sow for a good farrowing process and a good start of the milk production. So to conclude, there are a lot of positive developments in litter size over the last couple of years, and also body weight and body composition of the sows, and that has an effect on the nutrient requirements of the sows. Farrowing process and vitality of piglets can be optimized by giving the good feeding schedule to provide energy and to prevent overconsumption in lactation, multiple meals per day for energy during farrowing, avoid high calcium consumption in gestation, so avoid lazy sows, and apply a change in electrolyte balance to activate the calcium metabolism. Diets with fermentable fibers in gestation diet and lactation feed to prevent obstipation. And for a good milk production, we need water, we need a good feeding schedule, a higher number of meals per day, and a good feed composition. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Jan. Now, our floor is open for your questions. Once again, we are encouraging everyone to type in your questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box. Now, let's once again call back our moderator, Mr. Glenn Banogon, to join us here for the Q&A segment.
It's great to have you here, Jan, and team. So let's wait for questions to pop up. Oh, there's one. Okay. You shared that in 2023, the average litter size born alive is 15.1 for Netherlands, and pig swine per sow per year is 31.1. Wow. In Asia, we are still in the range of 20 to 28. How best can we narrow the gap?
Yeah, there are a lot of different factors related to that. For sure, one of the most important factors is heat stress. That is much more severe in Asia than we have here in the Netherlands. So the climate conditions are perfect here in the Netherlands. A very important second factor is also genetics. So the increase in litter size that we have seen over the last 20 years, that is mainly the result of genetic improvements and good selection of the sows. And for us as feed industry, we need to understand the requirements of the sows to feed them to follow the genetic developments.
Yeah, so it's really, if we have a good genetics, then we have to follow the feeding program and management of those genetics, as well as the taking care of the management of the environment, right?
Yeah, it's not as simple as that. Have we discussed also a part last couple of weeks about heat stress, and yeah, if there is severe heat stress, then a sow can only consume a maximum of about 5.5 kilos, and that is not enough to meet the requirements of the sow. And in a cooler climate, you can have a maximum feed intake of 9 kilos or even 10 kilos. So that also makes a major difference for the productivity of the sow for the next couple of litters.
Yeah, thanks. So, a question from Philippines. What are the effects of 21 days winning on the South? Because we see that in Netherlands you are winning 28.
If you wean at 21 days, then the amount of piglets that consumed feed before weaning is decreased. So if you wean at 28 days, the average weight at weaning is much higher, and also the amount of eaters before weaning is much higher. That will facilitate a much better growth and health after weaning. So there are major benefits for the piglets after weaning.
Yeah. So let's go to Indonesia. Huh? So if milk dries up during lactation, so I'm assuming this is within the first week, what should we do or what can we do?
Yeah, our recommendation is to follow the checklist. The checklist includes water availability, water quality, moment of diet change, diet composition in lactating feed. So what about, yeah, the feed intake in the days post farrowing? And what about the vitality of that litter of piglets? Since we are convinced that the piglets need to stimulate the udder, and that will initiate the milk production by the whole cascade of hormones, let's say, to, yeah, once more to facilitate the milk production.
Right. I think this is a very important question, Jan, no? Because a number of our farmers are still not feeding sows on expected day of farrowing. In your presentation, you mentioned that you need to feed them on the day or expected day of farrowing. How important is that practice of feeding sows on day of expected day of farrowing?
Yeah, if you want to have maximum results, everything needs to be good. And one of the topics of the checklist is feed intake also at the day of farrowing. Another important factor for vital piglets is availability to the colostrum. And if you take the piglets apart and you keep them apart for a long time, they will be less vital. So that's also an important factor for good vitality and a good start of the milk production.
Yeah, thank you, Jan, for those questions. We encourage the participants to still type in their questions so that our experts can answer that after this, and we will be sending that to you. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much once again, Jan. Now, on to our last subject matter expert for this episode. After completing her master's in animal nutrition at Wageningen University, she pursued her PhD at Newcastle University, focusing on management and diet strategies to help piglets overcome growth deficits. She joined SFR while finalizing her PhD, and for over 5 years, her research has centered on feedstuff evaluation, GIT kinetics, piglet trials, and rearing pigs with intact tails. Today, she will present on how nutrition affects the health and growth performance of piglets before and after weaning. Give it up for Dr. Ann Hetting.
Welcome, all, and nice that I can talk to you about the topic that I will present today, which is about pre-weaning and post-weaning strategies and how to help piglets. So this talk will be about how nutrition affects the health and growth performance of piglets before and after weaning. So in this first slide, you see that we have still a huge window of opportunity to target with nutrition, with management, with all kinds of things in a way that we can stimulate gut development. It's also a window in which the piglet encounters quite a bit of stressors. This window of opportunity already starts in the uterus, but it's up to 3 months of age, meaning that in this period the piglet will be born with all kinds of stressors during lactation, as well as being weaned. And if we make sure the piglet has a good start of life here, and with nutrition, amongst others, support the gastrointestinal tract, we can decrease their risk of developing gut related diseases later on. But if the piglet, for instance, like early stress listed here around weaning, early weaning, gut inflammation, infection, stuff like that, if they already encounter that early life, then they will have an increased disease trajectory later life as well. So we need to use this 3 months really to shape their gut and improve their health as much as we can. And we can already start with that pre-weaning. There are different ways to do so. Of course, the sow milk will be the most important nutrient for a piglet, but we have other opportunities to support the piglets as well. We know with these increased litter size, we have a higher number of piglets born light, with all kinds of consequences. But also we know that the colostrum intake, colostrum yield will not increase linearly with the amount of piglets being born, meaning that every pig consumes less colostrum with this increase in litter size. And therefore there's different commercial additive supplemental milk on the market. An oral supplement can be even given during the first 24 or 48 hours to the piglets, can be energy supplements, but it can also be some colostrum from the sow that the farmer has been able to milk from the sow. You can even give that. Supplemental milk can also be provided, and that's most of the times it's being given in case of really large litters, in case the sow cannot give sufficient milk to these piglets. So then supplemental milk can help, but you need to guarantee that hygiene is on top here, because if you don't get that in the right on the right track, then these piglets will get even more health problems than they would have before. And supplemental milk can actually be used to also improve weaning weight. But we should not forget that we also need to help the piglets to prepare for weaning, and therefore the creep feed is very vital in this aspect. So getting them used to how the diet would look like post weaning with more plant sources, etc., etc. And this diet, creep feed, don't expect creep feed to be able to improve pre-weaning performance. It will not do that, but it will improve post-weaning performance. And this is one of those images showing the importance of that. So on the bottom of these graphs, you see the feed intake before weaning, ranging from 0 grams to 2 kilos of feed intake of grams per piglet. 2 kilos per piglet is that then. And in the first graph, you see post-weaning feed intake during the first week post-weaning, and in the second graph, the average daily gain. What you really nicely see is a positive correlation between those two. So with an increase, with a high amount of pre-weaning feed intake, you see also a higher post-weaning feed intake, and similarly with average daily gain. So you see that the more you get into the piglet pre-weaning, they will benefit from it after weaning. But also please note that only around 60% of the piglets are considered eaters. And that can be different from one litter to another. It can also be different within a litter. So it can be litters that the sow really produces really sufficient milk. Therefore, the piglets are not interested in this creep feed at all. But it can also be other litters where almost 100% of the piglets are eating. But these amounts you see here are basically on an average pig, on the average piglet level. But it can be still within litter that 40% of the piglet hasn't consumed anything. And it's something we really need to target to get 100% or as close to 100% as much as we can. And that requires also a structural nutritional approach. So as already mentioned, colostrum, sow colostrum and sow milk will be the main target, or will be the main nutrient source for piglets. But you can help them with oral supplements, supplemental milk, solid feed intake before and after weaning. But if you see on the next figure. Yeah, you should target around 400 grams per piglet, more or less, at least more. But this is the picture I wanted to talk about. So here you see you start creep feed already before weaning. Mostly we advise to start already 1 week after birth, because the piglet needs to explore the feed also before it really consumes, and you need to take time for that. And then before weaning, you should transition to the transition diet we call. It's basically the same diet as you will feed at least a week post weaning. So you already need to feed the same diet. This is just to stimulate also feed intake post weaning, because the piglets already recognize this diet from the pre-weaning period, and therefore start eating sooner after weaning. So that's why please feed the same diet before and after weaning. And during this time, the week before weaning, you should already be able to establish a solid feed intake, a good amount of feed intake before you transition to, for instance, a weaner one. And please, as I stated here in red, please try to target 400 grams per piglet on average, that you will at least get in a piglet. That would be a good way forward. So how to formulate creep feeds? There are several ways and thoughts about this. If you want to stimulate feed intake in the first bit, then you can try to mimic sow milk as much as you can. You can add milk products, etc., etc. But adding too much milk products makes also the pellet quite hard, and piglets generally don't like a really hard pellet hardness. So therefore you need to be careful with that as well. And also nutrient density. We believe, at least we've seen in older pigs, that if the diet's really nutrient dense, it seems to have an effect on feed intake. The higher the nutrient density, the lower the feed intake is. So therefore be a bit careful with that as well. And of course, there are other factors that you can apply to stimulate feed intake with diet presentation, etc., etc. But on the next slide on this, yes, here you see what normally the diet looks like after weaning, and you see quite of a bit the starch and NSP goes up. That was not in the sow milk previously. This is of course from the plant sources. So we often advise producers also to already get these plant sources in a creep feed before weaning, so that the gastrointestinal tract is already getting used to different feedstuffs beforehand. And to be very honest, there have been studies shown that also have incorporated plant materials in a supplemental milk, therefore also already increasing the fiber content and therefore stimulating gastrointestinal tract development. So there should be a starch or a fiber component in these diets to get them used to it. And for your understanding, basically post-weaning, we group them into two physiological phases. So we have the acute phase, that's generally 1 week after weaning, and then the maturation phase, which is most of the time thereafter. And an acute phase, what we generally see is piglets will stop eating feed because of all the stress, and then no, they are not used to these diets, and then you will get intestinal damage because the villi will not get any nutrients to grow on or maintain. So therefore you see intestinal damage. Also, nutrient digestion and absorption is impaired. About the stomach function, I will talk later. But basically, everything is impaired. Also, fermentation capacity is not up and running. You have intestinal dysbiosis. And after that period, the piglets all of a sudden start eating again. They become hungry. The nutrient digestion and absorption will also go up slowly. Fermentation capacity will go up slowly, etc., etc. But often the hunger the piglet encounters is so much, so severe that they will have a risk of overeating, eating too much that still, despite the gastrointestinal tract is still developing further or is improving, it can still not handle that large amount. So you will still have some problems with, for instance, Streptococcus suis or E. coli. So therefore we need to be careful there. Also not still in that period, not to overload them too much. So yeah, care should be taken. So basically what we have at weaning is more or less two kind of piglets. So we have a robust piglet and a piglet that is at risk. A robust piglet is generally a piglet that has been suckling at their sow, but also consumed quite a bit of creep feed. We assume that this piglet is better able to cope with associated diet changes, especially if you feed the same diet before and after weaning. It starts eating solid feed earlier and at a smoother space. And probably we also expect that these piglets can transition to a normal diet or a diet, really targeting growth faster than the other piglets would have. So a piglet that is at risk is assumed to be a piglet that has only suckled from the sow. So has not eaten creep feed, stops eating feed post-weaning, is at a risk of overeating. As I mentioned before, they often stop eating food for a while, and then all of a sudden they start eating large amounts. And is therefore at a greater risk of post-weaning diseases or post-weaning diarrhea in this instance. And I really categorize them now like this, but I believe in practice you often you rear or move the piglets as they are as a litter, as a complete litter to the nursery unit. And what you can do is then, of course, there's still piglets eating within a litter and piglets that are not, but still you can classify the good litters, so the robust litters, let's say, with a high creep feed and treat them differently from the piglets that, or from the litters that have a really low creep feed intake. And this, setup also illustrates that there's no average piglet, and every piglet need to be more or less treated in a different way. So there's also no one feed that can be fed to all these piglets. So then I'm more or less stretching the difference between these piglets. So we have this at-risk piglet and the more robust piglet. And this is one of my own trials during my PhD in the UK, in which we classified piglets into 4 different classes on the basis of a color marker in the feed. And if the color marker was present, then we classify them as consumer. And we have here low, moderate, and high consumer. Basically, during 3 different occasions, we collected the feces, and if the piglet was 3 out of 3 occasions had a colored feces, then we considered it as a high consumer. If it was 2 out of 3, we considered it as moderate. And in case it was 1 out of 3, we considered as a low consumer, and none is 0 out of 0. And what you can see here, if we look at the body weight, so basically on day 0, we don't really see a difference. But already at day 19, so around 3 weeks of age, we saw already a shift. We see that the piglets that are considered high consumer, and mostly the high consumers, are quite light compared to the other ones. If we then look at the weaning weight, we see that the moderates and the high consumers are weaned at the lower body weight. So you see the piglets that have been consuming creep feed really needed some other nutrients rather than sow milk to grow, because apparently for these piglets the sow milk was not sufficient to grow on. But if you look at the post-weaning, so day 34 and day 68, you see that if you look at the average daily gain, you see that these piglets actually did much better. And basically this highlights, if you see in the next one, basically the summary, you see that eating solid food pre-weaning was basically for most piglets will be to compensate for the inadequate milk intake from their dam. But eaters, despite that they have been weaned lighter, they can compensate their growth defect post-weaning. And then how much should they be eating post-weaning? I think most of us don't have a clue how much pigs eat during the first week post-weaning. That's of course one of the critical periods after weaning. This is rather an old study, but still shows the big difference. This basically indicates the odds ratio, so the chances a piglet will have to develop a post-weaning digestive disorder. So the higher the percentage, so for instance here it's a 33% chance to develop diseases, digestive diseases, compared to, for instance, 1. Of course, you don't want to be in a group of 33%. But what is shown here, this is basically the feed intake in kilograms during the first week post-weaning. And what you see here, you have a higher odds to be at having digestive disorders if your piglets only eat less than a kilo. If they eat more, then you already see the risk of that decreasing. So again, the amount of feed intake should at least target 1.5 kilo. Then if the piglets consume that would be okay. But this is of course an old study, and I think now more and more the conception is that we need to feed the same diet before as after weaning. So I don't expect, doing that you will have this huge, low feed intakes, especially if you feed the same diet. Yeah, so feed intake is important. I already touched upon this topic very briefly, more in the sense what changes at weaning and acute phase. So basically in acute phase, one of the things piglets encounter is an impaired stomach function. We require a certain acidic stomach pH because the pH of the stomach plays an important role both in nutrient digestion as well as in as a microbial barrier, basically killing off bacteria. But in piglets, weaned piglets actually have a high stomach pH. So they have an impaired microbial barrier function and the pad nutrient digestion. And that all in all can lead to post-weaning diarrhea and increased risk on that. Basically, during lactation, during suckling, piglets consume the sow milk. Sow milk contains lactose. Lactose will be converted into lactic acid. And lactic acid, basically, really simple said, blocks the formation of the acid that is needed, hydrochloric acid that is needed to get the pH down to a certain moment that will start up protein digestion, for instance. So if you already don't transition to the solid diet, the plant-based diet early on, then this piglet will never get used to lactose not being in there. Lactose can be converted to lactic acid, or cannot get used to the production of hydrochloric acid, not already before weaning. So therefore, yeah, it's really important to start providing creep feed early on. And in a diet, we can help the piglets to overcome this stressor, and I will talk about that more in a bit. So one way to help the piglets overcome this impaired stomach function is by formulating the diets with the so-called acid binding capacity, ABC. And basically the acid binding capacity is the amount of acid or base that is added to decrease or increase the pH to a certain amount. In piglets, or in pigs in general, we work with a pH of 4, therefore ABC 4. The higher the ABC4 value, the higher the buffer capacity. So energy, starch, and fats basically have a little effect on ABC4. Crude protein, on the other hand, can have a strong effect. So therefore, really check the crude protein concentration of your diet, but also the feed ingredients you use. Minerals also have a high ABC4 buffer capacity, so be careful with those as well. And organic acids also have a strong effect, but they can actually lower the ABC4 value. And this is what I mentioned about, please check the feedstuffs you use, because they have a huge impact. For instance, the cereals here really have a low ABC4 value. The soybean meal, sunflower seed meal, rapeseed meal have a moderate ABC4 value. But if you then see, let's say, a fish meal, a skimmed milk powder, they have a huge impact on the ABC4 value. They are often used because they believe being highly digestible, but they have a huge impact on this. And it's just not only about the crude protein content, but also about the mineral content in these feed stuff, like fish meal and skimmed milk powder is high in calcium, and it has a huge impact on the ABC4 value. So be careful not to incorporate too high amounts of these feedstuffs because of the stomach function of a piglet being impaired. And the effect of ABC4 value or adding organic acids is a bit diet dependent as well. So on your left, you see a graph. Basically, is the percentage of average daily gain, feed intake, gain to feed ratio compared to the control. So the control diet is basically the similar diet, but then without adding organic acids. So in this case, in the first left corner, you see that the soybean meal is added with fumaric acid in different concentration, or soybean meal in combination with dried skimmed milk with organic acid. And basically what you see here is that the soybean meal diet has a bigger effect, the acidification of it, on average daily gain and gain to feed ratio than the soybean meal dried skimmed milk diet that has been acidified. A similar fact is seen on the graph on your right, in which they compared a soy protein concentrate diet with or without fumaric acid. It's of course always compared to the control, or with addition of casein with fumaric acid. And then you again see that addition of organic acid, in this case fumaric acid, has a bigger impact when you use soy protein concentrates than the casein. Casein is of course considered highly digestible. So this, from this slide, you can basically we can basically conclude that it's acidifying the diet, lowering the ABC4 value of the diet is more effective in less digestible diets. And also what should be taken into consideration, I already mentioned about the effect of crude protein on, for instance, the buffer effect, but also keep in mind that a piglet digestive function is really impaired at weaning, and therefore the protein that has not been digested will enter the large intestine, well, where it will be fermented with all kinds of consequences. Therefore, in this study done recently, they have been shown that lowering the crude protein content for a limited period of time, in this case was for 9 days post-weaning, actually improved their performance, the body weight at day 9, and also reduced antibiotic treatments in the pens and a number of treatments per pig. And basically in Europe, but also mainly in the Netherlands, we currently around 70-90% crude protein, well 17% crude protein at the immediate post-weaning phase, with a SID license level around 10.5, something like that. Even lower, some companies do. So we're quite low just because of this reason to support the piglets and don't overload them with too much protein in the large intestine. So you've seen, I think, hopefully by the message I tell you, that during the early post-weaning period, we focus mostly on maintaining health of piglets, with reduction of crude protein, with the addition of or formulating with ABC4, etc., and not so much on focusing on performance. And using fibers is a different way to do so. So basically, if we look at the fermentability of fibers, we have inert fiber and fermentable fiber. Jan already discussed about this in a bit more detail, but here you see a full list of inert fiber sources, fermentable fiber sources. And for the fermentable fiber sources, we also have those that are rapid fermentable and some that are more slower fermentable. And what we basically advise for the weaner piglets is to incorporate a decent amount of inert fibers in the acute phase, so the first week post-weaning. One way is to improve the digestive function, modify the microbiota, enhance fermentation. Basically what you do is diluting the diet with this inert fiber, making it less nutrient dense, and therefore what also happens is that the transit time in the small intestine will be faster, and therefore the nutrient or the feed that the piglet has consumed will stay less long in the small intestine, and therefore can also not cause problems with respect to fermentation, etc., etc. But if you feed this high inert fiber diet too long, it will reduce nutrient digestibility and penalize animal performance. So therefore, during the initial phase post-weaning, we advise to use inert fibers. Fermentable fibers in piglets, on the other hand, are a thing to avoid, especially during this early phase after weaning. They can slow gastric emptying rate, but basically they increase viscosity and they create fermentation in the hindgut. And this is something you don't want in this piglet that has an underdeveloped digestive system. Viscosity means that basically digestion will stay longer, for instance, in the small intestine, and therefore bacteria can ferment on it and grow on it, etc., etc. So in piglets during this early acute phase, fermentable fibers should be avoided. Inert fiber can be a plus. And just to briefly summarize, of course, due to time, I was not able to give you all the insights. But focus on the acute phase already before weaning, lower the crude protein content of the diet, think about functional amino acids that support gut health, lower the fermentable carbohydrates, higher the inert fibers, keep the health and improve average daily gain. You can already start with that. Increase the lysine to NE ratio just to improve the average daily gain. Increase the crude protein content a bit. Already work on the fiber fermentable and inert ratio a bit more because don't go low in fermentable fiber or in inert fibers or high in inert fibers for too long, because it then will reduce performance. And during the maturation phase, you can prepare them already for grower finishers, and focus on the lysine and the ratio. US ratio is then important as well, and you can add already be more fermentable fibers because of their good maturation. This is the last time, last slide from my presentation. It's basically an open review. You can just download which Schothorst wrote about different nutritional strategies for shaping the gut in piglets pre and post weaning. Some of the things I highlighted during the presentation are also discussed in there, but this is one is much more complete view than I've just showed you here on the couple of slides that I had. So please have a look at this review paper, and then you will be much more informed than what I discussed now.
Thank you very much, Dr. An. Now, our floor is open for your questions. Once again, we encourage everybody to take this opportunity to ask your questions by typing it in the chat box. Let's welcome back now our moderator, Mr. Glenn Banogon, for the Q&A segment.
Good to have you here, Dr. An. So let's wait for the first question to come in. Okay, there's a new one. Encouraging piglets to eat creep feed while they're still with the sow is a challenge. We know that. But how can we increase the percentage of piglets to consume more feed before weaning? And what should be that ideal target intake from day 7 normally to 28 days?
Yeah. Well, to touch upon the last one, I think Francesca really made a bold comment on pig progress with the 1 kilos per piglet.
I saw that.
We for sure don't manage to get that at Salthorst as well. I mentioned in one of the slides 400 grams. In the majority of trials that we do focus on creep feed intake, we manage around 500, sometimes 600 grams, but 1 kilo in a really rare occasion. But Francesca mentioned that because this is the ultimate target. We really should increase the creep feed intake as much as we can. And ways to do so are various. You can think about management. Piglets learn how to eat by the sow. So you can think about the feeder design, but you can also say, well, I don't want to spend money on that. But you can even just feed a handful of the creep feed daily on the ground. Sow can eat it, piglet will eat it at the same time because they are curious creatures. So in that sense, they can also learn from the sow. Next to that, feed them during multiple occasions a day. During my PhD, you see how curious these piglets are. As soon as you enter the pen, they will look what you're doing. Of course, they will eat your boots, but they will also be interested in what you put in the feed hopper. Feed hopper design is an important factor. Make sure that multiple piglets can access to the creep feed at the same time. I know that there are like feed hoppers available, the round ones. Well, they are perfect, but don't place them next to a solid wall because then the back ones cannot be reached by a piglet. So also make a full benefit of these creep feed hoppers. Also, the composition of the creep feed is important. Think about milk products, etc., etc. Also about the digestibility of the diet. But also think about the energy density. I already indicated that before. No, don't make it too dense because then they will stop eating, let's say, if it's too dense. Also think about factors like the pellet hardness. No, don't make it too hard. Think about pellet diameter. Don't make them too small because we've learned also from research that the bigger the pellet, also the pellet hardness decreases. But the bigger the pellet, piglets get more curious to it, can walk around with these pellets. They will not consume everything on the first instance, but they will at least, you will get their attention. And in some cases, in some farms, depending on how the creep feed intake is, you might even start feeding it as a mash just to get them starting and slowly go to the solid feed after it. So there are various ways to increase creep feed intake. But think about how explorative the piglet is, how curious the piglet is, and gather all that knowledge into management related practices as well. Get them attracted to this creep feed via different ways.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ann, for that. A lot of pointers, no? There's a lot of questions I am seeing, but for the interest of time, we will be answering, we'll be forwarding those questions to our experts.
Mhm.
The last question that I'll be asking Dr. Ann is there a minimum period post-farrowing that we can provide supplemental milk without affecting the milk production of the sows? Or supplemental liquid feeding? Will that affect the milk production of the sow if you have supplemental feeding?
You know, no, because piglets always prefer sow milk, so you should not be scared about that. They will always prefer sow milk for supplemental milk or for creep feed, so you should not be worried about that at all.
Yeah. So should not worry about supplemental milk feeding, but we should encourage them to eat solid feed also, right?
Yeah, especially if your solid feed is also what you feed afterwards. That should be the target before weaning as well. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Ann, for those answers. No? So we will be sending a lot of those questions to the SFR team, and then we will be sending that back to our online guest today. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. No worries.
Thank you so much once again to our distinguished speakers. Dr. Sandra Bentham de Grave, Mr. Jan Flederis, and Dr. Ann Hutting. Your insightful discussions during your individual presentations will undoubtedly have a significant impact on the swine industry. I am also confident that you have addressed the audience's questions. So I extend my thanks to all three of you. So now, I will pass the floor to the person who will lead the next segment of this program. A simple, nationalistic, family-oriented person, and a proud father of 7 sons and 1 daughter. Indeed, practicing what he preached. Expertise in technology transfer and application as well. Feed product development, technical sales, swine nutrition, and production, and on-farm, hands-on training for technical and sales personnel. Currently, he holds the position of Vice President, Nutrition and Research, Technical Lead for Swine with Aboitiz Foods. Let's welcome back Mr. Glenn Banogon.
Thank you, Shad. Thank you, Shad, for that nice introduction. So, I will be summarizing the takeaways for our experts from SFR. So, SFR is our technology partner with Goldcoin and Pilmico. So, we are working closely with them to deliver the new things to our esteemed customers, because we wanted to deliver that high performance to everyone. So how we can reach your peak performance together? Going to the presentation of Dr. Sandra, our takeaways there, just to summarize everything, is we should be selecting gilts with good birth weight as well as weaning weights. So everything starts from birth weight and weaning weights. Then, now, we wanted our gilts to be at 150 to 160 kilograms on the first insemination. But that is on the second estrus. It's not only of age, of weight, but also age. No? So those gilts should be 225 or at least 250 days of age. And we also learned that gilts will eat a lot, but we need to manage their growth rate to just plus or minus 650 grams per day. Back fat is also very important. No? At least 12 to 14 millimeters of P2 back fat on the first insemination. The correct feeding strategy during rearing, it is best to feed rearing diet or gilt development diet. One thing to emphasize, this is only good for 2 weeks, flushing. No? Increasing the feed from 2.5 to 3.5 kilograms on that last 2 weeks before breeding will result to higher litter size born alive. Since we are in Asia, we have to be careful. We have to take note of limiting or preventing heat stress to sows, as well as manage the risk of mycotoxins, such as DUN and zearalenone. So this is one thing that your nutrition partners, Goldcoin and Pilmico, is helping you in monitoring those risks. So the benefits of these takeaways is there is reduced culling rate before parity 3, and we will have higher reproductive performance of our sows. Going to the recommended gilt rearing feeding program, we start with gilt starter. So coming from after nursery, so about 25 to 65 kilograms, you'll be feeding them with about 1.8 kilogram of feed. And then you go to your gilt grower, you feed them by 6 weeks, from 65 kilos to 100 with 2.5 kilo of feed. Then you move to gilt developer from the 100 kilogram to 135 with about 2.8 kilos of feed. And emphasizing on the flushing, that is 2 weeks, you increase feeding to 3.5 kilograms per day. So that is for gilts. Moving on to sows. Our takeaway there is we should increase the energy intake in late gestation, which can result to heavier piglets at birth. feeding the sows at least 3 times a day, even during the expected day of farrowing, to reduce cases of stillborn, so that the sow will have enough energy during the farrowing process. Then it was also mentioned that transition feed is a must if we are to target peak performance. If we want to achieve the 15 or 14.5 above liter size born alive. Constipation is also very important. We need to address that. Prevent constipation, particularly around farrowing. The activation of calcium metabolism is important for farrowing and milk production. Our cheapest nutrient is water. So we should ensure that our lactation sows have at least 25 liters of water per day. Then the more frequent we feed the sows, the better it is. 3 times or 4 times a day feeding. In summary, if you want higher milk production, that is equal more water, more frequency of meals per day, and the diet composition. Moving on to the feeding program. As Jan mentioned, from day 108 to 112, about 3.2 kilograms of feed. From 113 to farrowing, 2.5 kilos for parity 2 and up. Then on the day of farrowing, no feed withdrawal, 2.5 kilograms. Then you increase half kilo per day. By day 8, it should be ad libitum or no limit feeding. The rule of thumb is 2 kilograms for sow maintenance and half kilogram per piglet nurse. So those are the looks of those piglets if you have that. Down to our winners. Next. For piglets, the early life programming improves livability and pre-weaning performance. The minimum target is at least 400 grams of crib feed while they are still with the sows. The week after weaning is the most critical or acute phase in a winner's piglet's life. So extra care should be taken in terms of feeding management to ensure smooth transition from milk to solid feed consumption. So we see pointers from Dr. Ann to consider acid binding capacity for the good balance of inert and fermentable carbohydrates or fibers, the use of highly digestible proteins. So these are things that our nutrition team within Goldcoin and Pilmico is looking at to deliver good performance to our piglets. So for our last slide, the important thing there is after weaning, 29 days of age, our target it should be at least 120 grams per piglet per day. No? And then if you look at, that is about 1.5% of the body weight. So anything you feed above 1%, there is growth. No? Then gradually you increase. And according to Dr. Ann, if we can achieve greater than 1.3 kilograms on the first week after weaning, if we can achieve 1.5, the better it is for those piglets. No? And then you increase feeding after that. So, with nutrition, with correct management, right environment, I believe that together we can achieve peak performance. Maraming salamat po. Sin kamon, sheshe. Dire makasih banyak. Daghang salamat.
Thank you so much, Mr. Glenn. I hope everybody has taken away a lot of learning from today's presentations. There has been a lot of new techniques that were discussed. Hopefully, these are techniques and knowledge that you can use in your own farm to improve your production and performance as a swine producer. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we've just wrapped up the first episode of our Agriconnect series. Thank you so much for joining us for this insightful first episode. Today, we delved into critical aspects of swine nutrition and management. Beginning with Dr. Sandra's enlightening presentation on the impact of nutrition on the development and productivity of the rearing gilt. She highlighted the importance of proper nutrition in improving piglet vitality and extending sow longevity. Next, Jan shared his experience and research on feed evaluation and innovative feed solutions. His insights on the developments in farrowing and milk production of the lactating sows provided us with valuable knowledge to enhance sow productivity. And finally, Dr. An took us through her comprehensive research on the health and growth performance of piglets, not just before weaning, but also after weaning. Her focus on management and diet strategies to help piglets overcome growth deficits was inspiring. It emphasized the importance of nutrition strategies. So, as we conclude, we kindly ask you to scan the QR code on the screen so that you can share your feedback. Please take a moment to complete this quick survey and let us know how we can improve. We'd like to thank you in advance for your valuable input. This episode marks the beginning of our journey towards a better, more sustainable agricultural future. We highly recommend joining us for the upcoming episodes, where we will continue to explore crucial topics in livestock production, bringing you closer to a utopian vision of food security. We would like to express our gratitude to everyone from China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia, who joined us in this first episode of the Agriconnect series. We hope that you've learned a lot and enjoyed the broadcast. So, before we officially wrap up, we would like to request everyone to please stay in your comfortable venue, as your respective country sales leader will be delivering short messages for each one of you. So please stick around after these closing remarks. This has been Shadid Sidri, and it's been an absolute pleasure spending this time with all of you tonight. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Agriconnect series.